Welcome to Earth and Kind Quests. My name is Mike, and this video shares about nets and how they could be used and improved in Dungeons & Dragons. With the 2024 Player's Handbook, a net now is considered to be mundane equipment. A net no longer is a martial weapon. The 2024 update provides a considerable upgrade compared to the 2014 version of the net. Even so, a few points still could be clarified and possibly improved. While I was preparing this video, I saw that Dungeons & Dragons already uploaded a separate video about nets. I found it to be informative and insightful. In order to avoid being redundant or competitive, I restructured my video with a different perspective and emphasis. In the video description here, you can find a web link for the nice video by Dungeons & Dragons. Anyone can use a net as an item of mundane equipment. In technical terms, the action requirement involves one attack of an attack action. The net can be thrown out to 15 feet at one target. A fighter or another character with the extra attack feature can use a net and still use another attack with a weapon or with an unarmed strike. You might encounter a slight complication with the rules about interacting with an object to draw out a net before using it, especially if the character's hands already are full before juggling objects to draw out a net. According to the 2024 rules, a net is not a weapon, and therefore it does not work with an attack of opportunity. I can suggest to discuss with your group about how to interpret this issue. Otherwise, after some consideration, I can understand about making the net into equipment and not a weapon. At first, I wanted to explore possibilities of how to apply a fighting style and a weapon mastery for a net, but then ultimately I recognized that a net can work better as a piece of equipment within the context of the other 2024 game mechanics. In most cases, I imagine that a net is made of a mesh of ropes or vines. The mesh size could be small or large. Conceivably, a woven mat or a carpet, a tapestry, or a blanket could perform like a net. A bundle of ropes and sticks, a giant canvas bag, or maybe a basket arguably could function like a net. In any case, the cost is listed as 1 gold piece, equal to the material cost of rope. That presumably refers to 50 feet of hemp rope as the standard. I will use this reference point about 1 gold piece worth of rope as a general guide for ascertaining what a net might look like. The size of the net is not mentioned directly, but the weight is described as 3 pounds. I should note that the falling net trap in the Dungeon Master's Guide, Chapter 3, mentions the size of a net as filling a square of 10 feet by 10 feet. Nothing is mentioned about needing 2 hands for using a net, and therefore I would infer that a character of small or larger size could use a net with 1 hand. A standard net, just like a falling net trap, can work against a target up to large size. A large-sized creature occupies a space of 10 by 10 feet, equal to the size of a falling net trap. A target of huge size or larger automatically succeeds with saving throws involving a net or a falling net trap, presumably due to the huge size of 15 feet by 15 feet, exceeding the space of the net at 10 feet by 10 feet. I would prefer to see options for using larger sizes of nets as well as possible extra material outfitting of nets. I will discuss about these aspects later during the video. Anyone can throw a net up to 15 feet at one target. The target must succeed with a dexterity saving throw or else become restrained. The saving throw is based on the net thrower's proficiency bonus plus dexterity modifier. At this point, the game rules become awkward. The rules presume that the net was thrown onto one creature as the target. Additionally, the rules are unclear about what might happen if the net thrower or anyone else might attempt to grab or tighten the net. No option is given for opening a net and using it without throwing the object. If the net will cover a space of 10 feet by 10 feet, then perhaps all of the creatures and loose objects inside this space should be subjected to the dexterity saving throw to avoid being trapped or restrained inside the net. Technically, objects do not attempt saving throws and they fail automatically. If a creature or object is partially outside the space of the net, then I would grant an automatic success with the saving throw. The problem with this approach is that the net may fill a space of 10 feet by 10 feet, but realistically the net may not be tall enough to wrap around the multiple creatures and objects inside the space. Given this complication, the easiest solution might be to go with the 2024 rules as written about choosing one target for the net. I still would allow for the target to be either a creature or a loose object. Escaping the net requires an entire action, but the difficulty challenge is set low with a flat DC 10 strength saving throw. The action for the saving throw can be attempted by the target inside the net, or by another creature within 5 feet of the target. According to these rules, the effectiveness of the restraint always is the same at a flat DC 10 for the strength saving throw. Even with a high proficiency bonus and dexterity score, the character throwing the net cannot increase the escape part of the saving throw DC above 10. In my view, the escape from a net should be more difficult if the net is being held or tightened by someone who is attempting to maintain the restrained condition on the target. I am not sure, though, how this kind of procedure might work within the game mechanics. The creature who threw the net no longer would be holding it, and therefore the net simply is draped over the target and not being controlled. Possibly someone within reach of the target could do something, such as to apply a grapple in addition to the restrained condition. The grapple attempt would allow for the target to roll for a choice of strength or dexterity saving throw based on the attacker's proficiency bonus plus strength modifier. A monk, though, would use the dexterity modifier for a grapple attempt. If the target will be grappled, then the saving throw DC to escape the grapple almost certainly will be higher than for escaping from the restraint of the net. 2 different actions would be needed for the target to break free from the 2 separate conditions. Naturally, a character with multiple attacks per round can be most effective with using a net and grappling. Even more efficient is a character with the new 2024 version of the Grappler feat, allowing to inflict damage and attempt to grapple simultaneously. In particular, a monk with the Grappler feat could be a prime candidate for using a net combined with grappling, always relying on the dexterity modifier. In my view, a target who already is restrained inside a net probably should be easier to be grappled. The restrained condition does impose disadvantage on dexterity saving throws, however, the target of a grapple could choose to attempt either a strength or dexterity saving throw. I would argue that a person could attempt to grab and tighten the net as part of the grapple attempt, thereby imposing disadvantage on the target's saving throw to avoid the grapple either with strength or with dexterity. Maybe this proposal is too overpowered. I have not tested it in a game. The easiest way to escape a net or any restrained or grappled condition is for the target to teleport, such as with the spell Misty Step or another means of teleportation. The Misty Step spell and similar features generally are easy for most characters to access through spellcasting, species traits, background, or feats. By character level 3 and certainly by character level 5, most characters can access a short-range teleport up to 30 feet at least once per long rest. If teleportation somehow is not an option, then attacking the net probably is the most efficient way to attempt to break free. A net is given an armor class of 10, a total of only 5 hit points, and immunity to bludgeoning, poison, and psychic damage. Most efficiently, someone with an extra attack feature can use one attack to destroy the net, virtually guaranteed to succeed with the low armor class and hit points of a net, and then still be able to use another attack of the attack action. Given the mechanics of a net in Dungeons & Dragons, what could be the optimal situations for using a net, rather than for doing something else? In my view, this question is about deciding whether or not imposing the restrained condition against one target, possibly just for a short time, will be more worthwhile than doing something else. The most powerful aspect of a net is to impose the restrained condition. The target's speed is reduced to 0. All attacks against the target are with advantage. The target suffers disadvantage with all of its attacks and with its dexterity saving throws. In a few niche situations, a flying enemy could be within a range of 15 feet of throwing a net. These situations are rare, but the restrained condition of the net would drop the target's speed to 0. Unless the flight includes a hover feature, then I would interpret for a flying creature with a speed of 0 to fall to the ground. I would suggest, though, to discuss these rules with your group. Some people might interpret differently. In another possible scenario, if a team is making multiple attacks per round, then one of those attacks instead could be used for throwing a net. Ideally, the timing of a net toss can allow for as many attacks as possible before the target or an ally of the target can attack the net, break the restraint, or apply a teleportation. If the target will fail the dexterity saving throw and become restrained by the net, then how many attacks can be attempted with advantage against the restrained target before the target will become free? In nearly every case, the advantage with attack rolls will result in more damage to the restrained target. The only question is about how long this situation can be sustained. Potentially, the restrained target will act immediately after or shortly after being restrained, and then the target almost certainly will become free from the net. Otherwise, an ally of the target might act to free the target. Compared to the typically short-lived duration of a net restraint, the alternatives of magical options potentially can restrain a target for a longer time, and with a higher difficulty for the target to escape. At least 3 spells with first-level spell slots can achieve these effects, including Ensnaring Strike, Entangle, and Snare. The saving throw to avoid the initial magical restraint typically will be about the same as against a mundane net, but then the saving throw DC to escape the spell's restraint typically will be higher than with a net. Notably, all 3 of these first-level spells come with extra features. Ensnaring Strike can apply damage to the target. Entangle can affect multiple targets at once within a square of 20 feet by 20 feet. The Snare spell normally requires 1 minute of casting time, but then it can be used for setting an ambush within the next 8 hours, empowered by the typically higher saving throw DC to escape as compared to a mundane net or a falling net trap. Instead of using magic, how could a net be modified or improved? The Dungeon Master's Guide offers limited guidance about how a heavier net can increase the saving throw DC to avoid a net and escape from a falling net trap. The same logic would imply that a character could acquire or craft a heavier net as a piece of equipment to throw at a target as usual, but with a higher DC of the strength saving throw to escape. For this kind of heavier and presumably sturdier net, I would add slightly higher armor class to the standard 10 and more hit points than the standard 5. Specifically for a falling net trap, I can suggest to outfit the net with bells or other noise-making devices intended to alert people in the vicinity that a trap has been activated. Another kind of outfitting might include fragile pots filled with tar or maybe green slime, or perhaps a swarm of spiders that can break and spill onto the victims of a falling net trap. If these kinds of practices are popular in a region, then perhaps characters will encounter a goblin or a kobold who has found and repurposed one of those nets for personal use. Could a net be crafted with extra weights to hold down the perimeter toward increasing the difficulty for a target to escape? I could imagine weights of rocks, chunks of metal, seashells, and other items that could act similarly as the weights that people use in fishing nets. Throughout the world, people have outfitted their fishing nets with diverse forms and styles of sinkers or weights. I can imagine that these kinds of weights would be useful for a net with an enhanced DC of a saving throw for a target to escape a restraint. Another equipment enhancement might involve the use of wooden stakes or iron spikes. A creature can use an action to hammer down these stakes or spikes, thereby increasing the DC of a saving throw to escape from the net. A similar preparation conceivably could be devised with a falling net trap as well. Could a net be modified for inflicting damage? Maybe a net is equipped with spikes or thorns, adding 1d6 of piercing damage at the start of a target's turn when restrained inside the net. Additionally, I would consider adding poison onto the spikes or thorns. Possibly the net itself could be soaked and saturated with poison that comes out through contact. I would start with 1d6 of poison damage, again applicable at the start of a creature's turn when restrained inside the net. Could a net be made from special ropes or vines that stretch and contract? If this kind of material is available, then conceivably it could expand around a target and automatically contract for a tighter grip. In this case, a target could make the saving throw as normal to avoid the net in the first place, but then the saving throw DC to escape the automatically contracting net probably should be higher than the standard DC 10. Could a net be a larger size than for a single target of a large or smaller creature? Certainly, these kinds of larger nets have existed in the real world for many centuries. Again, I would refer to the examples of fishing nets for ideas about how these nets would look and how they would function. Typically, they are operated by more than one person, and sometimes they are parts of larger mechanisms. In terms of game mechanics, a multi-person device would be something like siege equipment in the Dungeon Master's Guide Chapter 3. The general concept here is for a large or multi-component device to require more than one action to operate. In the case of a net, however, the concept is slightly different, involving two or more people operating the net simultaneously, such as one person holding or preparing an action to work in tandem with an ally. The size of a net can become complicated in Dungeons & Dragons, mostly because of the size of the characters or the creatures who might be using the net. The standard net in Dungeons & Dragons is intended to be used by a small or larger creature. The size of this net fills a large space of 10 feet by 10 feet, equal to the space of a large-sized creature, and it creates no effect against a huge-sized or larger creature. Based on this reference point, I would propose at least 2 larger sizes of nets. Each increasing size category would accord with the next standard size space, such as 15 by 15 feet, and then 20 feet by 20 feet. Likewise, each size would be ineffective against a creature that occupies a space larger than the space of the net. For instance, a net of 15 by 15 feet would be ineffective against a creature of gargantuan size that occupies a space of 20 feet by 20 feet. Next, I would imagine that a creature could use a net up to one size larger than itself. A net of 15 by 15 feet, equal to the space of a huge-sized creature, would need to be wielded by a large-sized or larger creature. Otherwise, this size of net would require 2 creatures of medium size to be able to operate it effectively. I should note that several character species are small size. the 2024 rules imply to allow for a small-sized character to manage the same as a medium-sized character in some but not all situations. Specifically, the 2024 rules appear to imply that a small-sized player character could use a standard size of net that fills a large space of 10 feet by 10 feet. What kind of net might be too powerful in Dungeons & Dragons? In this respect, I would refer to a device such as the Tangler Grenade in the adventure module of Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I can appreciate that the saving throw DC is high, around the maximum of my expectation with a mundane, non-magical item. I probably would not allow for a mundane item to be more powerful than the Tangler Grenade. Other than modifying a net as a piece of equipment, potentially the use of a net could be improved through a character's features. The game rules about a net rely on a character's dexterity ability score, and therefore a character with a higher dexterity score will be more effective when using a net. Grappling can be an effective combination with a net, but typically grappling relies on strength and not dexterity. Only a monk character could use dexterity for both the net toss and a grappling attempt. A character with an extra attack feature can be more effective with a net, able to attempt the net toss instead of one attack. However, a net is not a weapon, and therefore it does not work with a weapon mastery or a fighting style. Once again, a monk appears to be the best option here with a net, relying on dexterity for the initial throwing of the net and for attempting a grapple, as well as for making multiple attacks per round, and typically not involved with fighting styles or weapon masteries anyway. Overall, I find that a net can be useful in niche situations. Generally though, other options instead of a net probably are more reliable for imposing the restrain condition and sustaining it for a longer period of time against most targets. Nonetheless, maybe I have missed something here. What are your thoughts and experiences with using or improving nets in your games of Dungeons & Dragons? Please share in the comment section. As always, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.